Ko Brikau toku ingoa, ko rangatira pikaia I ESR, te puaho e rotorua, kei tamaki te kouro aho. Huri ngā mihi ki a tātou, ka taua, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou, ka taua. Well, thank you very much from a very sodden Auckland. We remain in a state of emergency, so it's with regret that I'm not able to join you in person, but at least we have this time together remotely. It's a privilege to be really speaking at the beginning and opening this day for you. And I wanted to start, first of all, by looking back over the SHIVERS project. And I'm not going to go in as much detail as Peter did, but this basically sums it up. You're doing an amazing job. This is a long-lived international collaboration that is delivering real impact both nationally in New Zealand and internationally. So I really wanted to start by saying, well done. But the next thing that I just wanted to reflect briefly on is as we look well down the road ahead, we know that science is changing, technology is changing, public expectation is changing, and I've got 5 themes, of which 3 I'll speak in more detail, that just help us understand what might be further down that road that will be informing important components of our science. Many of these you'll be aware of, but I just wanted to reflect on them. First is data science. We've talked, everyone's talking about data science, artificial intelligence, machine learning and so on. And perhaps it's felt a little bit like an unrealised sort of thing for the future. And I thought that based on some information that our Chief Data and Analytics Officer presented to the SLT yesterday, I just had a couple of slides on ChatGPT. Some of you might have seen this in the media. But ChatGPT is a chatbot, and we all know what they're like when they want to chat with you, and it mimics human conversation. It's actually passed the Turing test, which means it's indistinguishable in a conversation from that with a human being. And it's able to write poetry, it can write computer code, it can pass exams, and even hold a conversation. And it actually scored a B on the Wharton Business School exams. Wharton Business School is a prominent business school. It only got a C+ in some University of Minnesota exams on 95 multi-choice and 12 essay test. But just to reflect on what this technology is capable of, when Jan asked it, what about calculating the mean or average of a data set in different languages and comparing the approaches to different computer languages? And when that question was put to ChatGPT, it came back and said, in summary, if you have a large data set stored in a relational database, if you want to perform simple calculations such as the mean, SQL could be a good choice. If you want to perform more complex data analysis and visualization, can be a better choice. Well, that's a pretty good answer, really, to that question. But let's up the stakes a bit more, and she asked it to write a poem about ESR. So here we have it, ESR, a beacon of light, guiding us through the darkest night. A research institute second to none, advancing science, our future one. In the last verse, ESR a shining example to all of how science can help us stand tall. We are grateful for all that they do in the service of our planet and all of its crew. So AI is actually reaching the point, whereas in the past we would collect data, we would analyse it, we would report on it, we would elevate that perhaps to dashboards, and we would often discuss most of our work, including in infectious diseases, with a historical perspective. We know in influenza and other infectious diseases, it's the future perspective, designing vaccine for the future, for example. And increasingly, AI and machine learning will give us the ability to have a degree of quantification and insight into the future that we've previously only had access to in the past. And so it's likely that we now really will see AI delivering a much more prominent level of impact. At ESR, we're currently implementing a software package called Snowflake. The New Zealand Police, the Ministry of Health here in New Zealand all have this. And the thing about this new package is that it enables really seamless access for our researchers to a data lake. A data lake is not perhaps the lake that we're seeing with a laptop floating in the water in Auckland recently, but a data lake is where you store all your really raw data, the source data, perhaps unstructured, a bit messy, and a data warehouse is where you put your more structured and finalised data. So it will provide seamless access to that. And alongside that, a whole lot of data science and data application tools that will be easy for researchers to access. Finally, data sharing, sending a spreadsheet to collaborators will change. There'll be a single repository, and that single repository is what everyone will use. All of the security will be looked after, access from international accounts will be fine, and that one source of truth will be the only source of truth that everyone relates to. The second theme in New Zealand in researchers is Māori engagement, or perhaps more than Māori engagement. We're typically engaged, but now we're talking about co-creation and co-leadership at all stages. And TANIFA, our infectious diseases platform, that nearly $40 million platform, has four principles, steeped in Māori tikanga, te akitanga through the rangatiratanga, and our values down the side here, aroha mahi tahia, ko tahitanga. But the key thing here is that Māori input has been right from the very beginning, and we have a co-director Māori and a co-director infectious diseases, and it is changing the very fabric of how this research is being performed. Importantly, communities will define the key research problems, and then they will be the guiders of the work that needs to be done. And then the research providers will have the challenge of responding to those things. The third theme, very pertinent in Auckland at the moment, is climate change and health. And I just picked one example here. In Australia, there's a problem with Japanese encephalitis. I'll just read this headline from the New Scientist. Australia's record-breaking rainfall and flooding has provided an ideal breeding ground for Culex mosquitoes, which transmit the virus. It's generally found in this yellow area, and you can see that it's to the north of Australia, to Southeast Asia. It's also in some of the Pacific Islands. But it's spread to mainland Australia, and 45 cases have now been reported in mainland Australia, including 7 deaths. Unfortunately, there's an animal vector as part of the cycle with the mosquitoes, and that's pigs. It's now endemic in pigs, so the likelihood of being able to eradicate this is very low, or probably unrealistic. There is a vaccine available that I could have chosen 2 or 3 other viruses in Australia, Murray River virus, for example, for which there is no vaccine. So you can see here, it's the very tip of Australia that historically has been the domain of Japanese encephalitis, the Torres Strait region. But now these are the states where Japanese encephalitis has been detected, and now vaccination is being recommended in this area, the Murray River area. And this is just an indication of how climate change will interact with changing health, in particular infectious disease. So in New Zealand, this is a cumulative rainfall map, 7 days of rainfall, and you can see that in the northern or the central North Island and in the north, there's been over 200 millimetres of rain. Actually, most of that fell within a 48-hour period. To give you an idea of what that means, Auckland has now received 40% of its annual rainfall. It's the 1st of February. So in January, traditionally a dry month, we've had 40% of our rainfall. 200 millimetres of rain in that 7 days exceeds our monthly rainfall in August in Auckland, so in our winter months, by a considerable margin. And when you look at what happened in Auckland, this is a day, 24 hours along the x-axis, and these are all the records. It goes back to the 60s, And you can see plotted there hourly rainfall through a 24-hour day. And this blue line gives you a glimpse of what happened in Auckland in 24 hours. The previous record was 162 millimetres of rainfall. In that 24 hours, we had 262 millimetres. Just the fourth theme, and I noticed that it's in your agenda, collaboration is just getting more and more important. No one organisation has all of the pieces of the puzzle, and we have to work together. We have relationships that we're developing internationally, and I know SHIVERS is doing this very well. The Doherty Institute nationally with University of Otago, University of Auckland, and Waikato. And then theme 5, as we see the changes in the New Zealand science system, impact really counts, making a difference to people's lives. So that brings me to my last slide. Just to say that SHIVERS is a really critical part of ESR and of course other organisations represented today, exemplified by international collaboration, high quality research with publication in high impact journals, and national and international impact. The scientific landscape is changing, and the areas that are becoming more important to ESR and other organisations are data science. For us in New Zealand, the centrality of Māori, co-creation and leadership rather than just engagement, and the impact of climate change on health, which has a very important dimension in infectious disease. The first government report in New Zealand on climate change related more to the infrastructure things, weather, sea level rise, but the next report that has been signalled by the Green Party will focus on climate change and health. Other important areas are just the ongoing transition into DNA and genomics, eDNA, environmental DNA, DNA and wastewater. It's bringing ESR's work closer to the clinical coalface of the patient and digital forensics. And finally, the New Zealand science system reforms, which I haven't really spoken about, will be identifying national research priorities. That'll be important for SHIVERS to think about how they fit with that. And over the next 18 months, there is likely to be an opportunity for increased research funding for the important activities that ESR and SHIVERS